Good afternoon to you. I'm Danilo Evangelista. Welcome to our tropical weather video for today, Monday, June 10th, 2024. Today we're going to talk about when the wait for Alberto will end because there are hints by some of the models now that increasingly it might actually be very soon. We're going to go over that today. So thanks for joining. Let's get started. First off, taking a look at the National Hurricane Center homepage. Nothing expected in the next 7 days in the Atlantic. Things as of right now expect us to remain quiet, but it seems like if the models are correct, maybe that might change pretty soon. In the Eastern Pacific as well, though, nothing expected over the next 7 days. So overall, right now, not too much happening as of yet. Taking a satellite look, though, off the Atlantic, you could see in terms of IR satellite, you could see that there's not still a lot happening. We have energy that's moving off the coast of the United States, probably associated with the front. There's also lots of convective activity in the Caribbean and eastern and even portions of the far eastern Pacific as well. This is associated and this is expected that this would happen, especially that we have some sort of pattern with our Central American gyre beginning to take shape. And this will really, over the next week, how this consolidates and where we end up seeing most of the energy associated with the Central American gyre will really be important as to what kind of setup we see in the Central American gyre. But regardless, there is lots of convective activity. It tends to happen with these kind of big monsoonal gyre setups. And either way, whether or not something forms, I will continue to write home the fact, no matter what, that flooding rains and gusty winds will occur despite whether or not there is a tropical system that is named or not. That's just the nature of these systems. They tend to bring heavy flooding rains to basically really, really large areas. Seems like it's going to be Central America for a while. We're going to get a bunch of these convective thunderstorms appearing. Then eventually, maybe they'll try to find a way to consolidate somewhere in the Gulf, potentially. But then also, as that moisture rises to the north too, there will be lots of flooding rain to South Florida coming later this week into next week as well. So keep in mind with that. Other than that, in the Eastern Atlantic, not much going on. Maybe a tropical wave moving off the coast of Africa, but other than that, not much else happening. But let's take a look, though, at the models. And I actually have the European today, but let's actually start with the GFS just to see what it shows right now for the 12Z and bring it out in time. And this is why we're kind of watching. You can see as we get towards hour 96, you notice that instead of the Gulf of Mexico, and this is something that the models have begun to really hint at within the last day or so, start to notice vorticity begins to appear off the southeast coast. The GFS, you can see, tries to do something with it. You can see some stronger vorticity values being indicated here, and there's also a closed sort of low pressure system that tries to take shape, but then ultimately the GFS ends up going weak on it. This is now out to hour 144. We have some sort of developing sort of system in the Gulf. Probably looks to be very messy and probably disorganized at best, but whatever happens, wherever this does impact, the GFS on this run at least has the storm up to hour 168. This is probably one of the storms that we're looking at in terms of this whole Central American gyre setup, regardless of whether or not this does get named. Excuse me there. We'll probably see, once again, heavy rain and gusty winds either way to whoever does get the direct effects from whatever this system is. But then you could see past that and just moves inland, but still not anything really coherent that the GFS has. But really quickly, back to that thing that you see off the southeast coast, the GFS somewhat trying to hint out something, and the reason why I point that out is because sometimes, and especially recently over the last several years, we would get these kind of small little spin ups to form, especially off the southeast coast, and aided by the Gulf Stream, they would really spin up quickly, and sometimes end up becoming quick name storms, or quickies as people like to call them, or quick spin-ups too. But the bottom line is they actually do end up becoming named storms, and sometimes these kind of spin-ups that we had off the southeast coast is how we would end up getting our first named systems of the season, of the hurricane season to form. The GFS is maybe showing something happening on one hand, but the euro on the other hand, let me really quickly bring up the European, not this one. Let me actually bring up this one. Same model. This is the same European, but this one just loads the runs faster. And so I'll show it now. It's updated to the 12Z anyways, which is great. So the European for the 12Z, notice hour 24, hour 40, and then hour 72. Look, we start to get some energy. Probably also, if we look back on the GFS2, let's compare the two. Definitely more energetic on the European, more vorticity showing up there, and you could also see there's definitely some sort of closed low level vortice here, some sort of low level vortex or something that develops on the European at hour 72. Hour 96, we see it strengthens probably over the Gulf Stream right now. And you can see vorticity colors also strengthening too. And then look at this at hour 120. Look at that. That looks like what we typically look at when it comes to tropical systems. This is definitely a bona fide tropical system. At hour 120, look at how all closed these isobars are, and notice how concentrated and strong the vorticity is over one small area. Probably nothing more than a moderate tropical storm at best, but it still is a signal for a tropical system, for sure. Doesn't really impact anywhere though, because it moves off to the northwest away from Bermuda, and then it kind of stays over the Gulf Stream. And this is what's gonna aid it, is generally the Gulf Stream sea surface temperatures. And then you could see hour 144. After that, now we're at 7 days, and you could see in the Eastern Pacific there's something that tries to form on the European. That goes inland, and that's gonna kind of aid in whatever sort of mess or messy setup, in the very least, that'll try to develop in the Southern Gulf, and probably become the next main focus, and probably the main focus when it comes to this whole Central American gyre thing, at least in terms of development in the Gulf of Mexico. But nonetheless, when we're talking about the weight for Alberto, we have a model like the European, which especially is one of the most credible models, even more than the GFS, especially over the last several years, showing something like this forming. It definitely raised questions, and the question is that really a credible source? Is it really credible that the European is showing something like this forming? Well, if we take a look at that with sea surface temperatures actually in the region, you could actually see on the European, or at least in comparison to the European, this is the Gulf Stream. This is generally off the southeast coast, generally where the European has this system. So you can see it's right off the southeast coast near the North Carolina, South Carolina area, just north of the Bahamas. And where is that region in comparison there to where this storm is expected? Roughly right in here. And you could see, yeah, in terms of sea surface temperatures, we're marginally there, 25, 26 degrees Celsius, but I'd imagine, at least in terms of development, this will probably be barely enough. It's probably not that much of a high energy system anyways. It's not like we're looking at a hurricane developing out of this. But in terms of these quick spin ups, 25, 26, maybe even some 27s in here, although that's more likely as we get further south along the Gulf Stream. There is definitely some energy to go around along the Gulf Stream that might give us a little kick, at least when it comes to development. And definitely the European seems to go on to the idea that something may track over this area. And then hour 216, just kind of zooming out really quickly, you could also see after that some sort of system trying to develop too in the Gulf of Mexico as well. So if this doesn't become Alberto, which is our first name system, we might as well have Alberto at least within the next week and a half, or at least that's what the European is indicating, or at least some sort of tropical development occurs in general. But sea surface temperatures are warm along the Gulf Stream, definitely in some sort of aid for this system. And if you zoom it out once again across the entire Atlantic, not only just the Gulf Stream, but once again kind of pointing out the entire Atlantic as a whole, just look at how widespread all of these warm sea surface temperatures are. So when it comes to the conversation on when will Alberto form in the Atlantic, or at least when will the wait for Alberto end? I'm pretty sure it is going to be within the next week or so, probably 2 weeks tops, that it seems like Alberto may form in the Atlantic. And makes sense since we're now into hurricane season. It is almost mid-June. I'm pretty sure now development is bound to happen at some point, and it seems like maybe over the next several days we might have to watch the southeast coast, and the National Hurricane Center might actually put a small hatched area of yellow with a little X mark on there, or as as sometimes I like to call it, they'll crayon the southeast coast. They might as well do that over the next week or so, or a few days. It's actually going to be less than a week when this comes into play. But bottom line, when will the wait for Alberto end? Might be pretty soon. Anyways, with that being said, though, I'm gonna end it off here. Thanks for watching. Obviously, if you like what you saw today, we would always encourage it. If you like, comment, subscribe, share with family and friends. Also, comment your thoughts too. If you have any questions, always encourage them to write them up, and I will try to respond as soon as possible. Stay safe. Have a blessed day, a great rest of your afternoon and evening. Peace, love, and kindness to you all, and we'll talk again tomorrow. And we'll see, maybe, are we closer to Alberto tomorrow? We'll have to see. Anyways, see ya.